Imagine waking up in the quiet comfort of your own home, only to be plunged into a nightmare that has haunted a small town for over 100 years. You are about to step into the humid Iowa night of June 1912, where an entire family and their guests were silenced forever in their sleep. Keep your lights on as we explore the dark, unsolved mystery that refuses to stay buried. The summer of 1912 arrived in Villisca, Iowa, with a deceptive, humid calm. It was a town of modest ambitions, where the scent of freshly mown hay clung to the evening air. The Moore family, Josiah, Sarah, and their 4 children, had spent the afternoon at the Presbyterian church. The children were tired, their faces still bright with the simple joys of a Sunday school picnic. They returned to their white-framed farmhouse, unaware that the sunset would be the last one they ever witnessed. Neighbors noticed the house growing strangely quiet as the shadows of the cornfields stretched across the yard. The windows stood open to catch a breeze, yet no voices drifted out into the humid night. The kerosene lamps remained unlit, casting the home into a suffocating, unnatural darkness. Downstairs, the family's dinner sat cooling on the table, untouched and forgotten as the clock ticked toward midnight. A sense of wrongness settled over the neighborhood, an intuition that the wind had stopped blowing for a reason. No dogs barked, and the crickets seemed to hush their rhythm in deference to the approaching storm. The Moore house became an island of silence in a sea of rural tranquility. Deep inside that wooden structure, something was waiting for the family to drift into the deep, heavy sleep of the exhausted. Every floorboard, every loose nail, and every shadow seemed to hold its breath. Something was shifting in the darkness, watching the innocent souls settle into their final hours of life. But as the clock struck midnight, the true horror was only just beginning to unfold in the stillness of the room. Morning broke on June the 10th with a bright, mocking clarity that betrayed the tragedy hidden behind the Moore house walls. When the family failed to appear for their morning chores, a concerned neighbor decided to investigate the unusual stillness. He walked up the porch steps, his boots thudding softly against the worn wood, peering through the glass of the locked front door. Inside, the parlor was choked with a heavy, metallic scent that stopped him in his tracks. He called out, but only the dust motes dancing in the morning light answered his desperate inquiry. Panicked, he summoned the town marshal, who forced his way into the stifling, silent atmosphere of the home. The rooms were stifling, filled with an oppressive heat that seemed to radiate from the very walls. As they climbed the stairs, the marshal's lantern light caught the edges of a scene that would destroy their peace of mind forever. Every bed held a tragedy, every room a reminder of a life snuffed out in a moment of mindless cruelty. The house looked perfectly normal from the outside, but the interior whispered of a carnage that defied human logic. There was no struggle, no frantic fight for survival, only the terrible finality of a sudden, brutal intrusion. They moved through the halls like ghosts, terrified of what they might see in the corner of the next doorway. The air was thick with the weight of the unknown, and the silence was now a physical presence in the house. As they pushed open the final bedroom door, the marshal stepped back, his face turning pale as he realized the killer had not left a single survivor behind. The investigators moved through the house with trembling hands, documenting the carnage left behind by the unknown assailant. The primary evidence was a heavy axe, discarded in the corner of a bedroom, its surface stained with the grim history of the night. Curiously, every mirror in the home had been covered with cloths, a strange, ritualistic detail that suggested a motive far more complex than simple robbery. The killer had been methodical, leaving almost no fingerprints or stray possessions, as if they had materialized and vanished like smoke. Deep gouges marred the wooden door frames, evidence of a frenzy that had shattered the sanctity of the household. A plate of half-eaten food stood on the kitchen counter, a haunting reminder that the family had been interrupted in the middle of their daily lives. Investigators found a small piece of bacon left on the floor, suggesting the killer had been comfortable enough to linger while their victims slept. There was no sign of a break-in, implying the murderer either knew the family or gained entry with ease. The town descended into a frantic state of paranoia, with everyone locking their doors and carrying firearms in the bright daylight. Each piece of evidence raised more questions than it answered, weaving a tapestry of confusion that paralyzed the local police. Why would someone travel to this quiet town, commit such a heinous act, and then simply dissolve into the night? The atmosphere in Villisca turned toxic as suspicion turned neighbors against each other in the search for a monster. And then, hidden deep within the floorboards of the bedroom, investigators found the piece of evidence that would change the trajectory of the entire case. With the house processed and the town in mourning, the list of suspects began to grow with terrifying speed. Initially, fingers pointed toward a local businessman who had long held a bitter public grudge against Josiah Moore. Others whispered about a transient population of drifters who rode the rails through the state, known to be capable of inexplicable violence. Even a traveling preacher who had been in town during the days leading up to the murders fell under the intense scrutiny of the detectives. His sudden departure from Villisca the morning after the crime made him a prime target for local authorities. The detectives combed through his background, finding dark secrets and a history of erratic behavior that bordered on the deranged. Yet as each potential suspect was dragged into the light, the evidence against them crumbled under the weight of alibis and contradictions. The community felt a mounting rage, demanding someone pay for the blood spilled within the Moore house. Newspapers from across the country swarmed the small town, turning a private tragedy into a national obsession. Gossip became currency, and every secret held by a resident of Villisca was dragged out and examined for a hint of guilt. The pressure on the law enforcement team became nearly unbearable as they failed to secure a single concrete link to the crime. Every lead felt like a dead end, and every theory felt like grasping at shadows in the dark. The killer was still out there, possibly watching the town fall apart from the comfort of anonymity. But the investigation took an unexpected turn when a bloodhound tracked a scent leading directly to the local train depot, pointing toward a much more dangerous possibility. The legal drama that followed was a spectacle of frustration, misinformation, and raw, unfiltered public anger. Trials were held, but the lack of physical evidence left the proceedings feeling more like a theatrical performance than a quest for truth. The courtrooms were packed with onlookers who hung on every word, desperate for a scapegoat to pacify their lingering terror. Defense attorneys argued that the case was built on circumstantial fluff, while the prosecution relied on the desperate hope of finding a culprit. Every time a new suspect was brought before the judge, the town's pulse would quicken with the hope of final closure. Yet the jury remained unconvinced, and the defendant was always eventually walked away, leaving the crowd in a state of volatile fury. The public outcry reached a fever pitch, with rumors of vigilante justice spreading through the streets like a wildfire. People no longer felt safe in their own beds, and the reputation of the local law enforcement was shattered beyond repair. It seemed that the law was completely impotent against a killer who had simply erased their own trail. Journalists fueled the flames, printing inflammatory headlines that painted the case as an unsolvable enigma of the modern age. The town became a tourist destination for the morbidly curious, while the original residents struggled to reconcile with the ghost-filled reality of their surroundings. Every night, families checked their locks a dozen times, haunted by the realization that a monster could walk among them without ever leaving a trace. As the final court session ended in a mistrial, the silence returned to the town. But it was a different, heavier silence than before, because the true nightmare had only just begun to burrow into the town's history forever. A century has passed since that humid June night in Villisca, yet the silence surrounding the Moore house remains deafening. The white farmhouse stands as a frozen monument to an unsolved tragedy that bled into the bedrock of Iowa. Skeptics point to cold case records and missing evidence, while locals whisper of a restless presence that never left those rooms. Generations have come and gone, but the town still carries the invisible weight of 8 souls taken in their sleep. Many who visit the site report the sharp, metallic scent of iron lingering in the air long after the sun sets. Psychics claim the attic holds echoes of frantic prayers that were answered only by the bite of steel. Investigators still study the patterns of the axe blows, searching for a signature that the original detectives failed to decode. The house was eventually restored, but the wood seems to remember the violence etched into its very grain. Every floorboard groan sounds like a muffled cry for justice that has been denied for 100 years. Tour guides avoid the children's room, where the air grows unnaturally frigid even on the hottest July afternoons. The mystery has woven itself into the folklore of the Midwest, transforming a brutal slaughter into a ghost story for the ages. Tourists peer through the glass, hoping to glimpse the truth that remains buried under layers of dust and time. Perhaps the culprit escaped justice, but the house itself seems to be keeping a terrifying, permanent record. Yet, as the sun dips below the horizon, some claim the shadows in the nursery are beginning to take a very familiar and very lethal shape. The blood has long since dried, but the questions remain as sharp as the axe that took 8 innocent lives. Do you believe the wandering preacher George Kelly was the culprit? Or was this the work of a calculated professional assassin? Join us in the comments to share your theory on who truly committed the Villisca tragedy. If you found this dive into the shadows chilling, remember to subscribe to Nova After Dark for more deep dives into the unknown.